It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back to your feel-good breakfast show. It's Expresso right here on SABC3. Sorry to be so harsh. Your tablet there. Give you a concussion. Anyway, sometimes it's more than just a bump on the head. Concussions stand out as the single most common type of traumatic brain injury. Now, Friday is Concussion Awareness Day, and of course, seeing that it's rugby season, we just want to say well done to the Bokke as well.
Yes.
We are joined this morning by the trusted Dr. Darren Green, who unpacks everything we need to know about this head trauma. And of course, if you have a question or if you have a comment, you can call us on 021-430-9881. Whenever I think of concussion, I do tend to think of like people that play those hectic contact sports, like rugby players, hey? Because I mean, I'm sure it's like a thing for them.
Yes, but everyone thinks concussion can only happen in sport. It can happen when someone has a fainting episode in the shop or in the supermarket.
Oh, wow.
And they fall to the ground and bump their head.
Yeah.
Can even happen innocently when you get tripped and fall in a mall. So, so many different areas.
That was my first question to you. What exactly is a concussion?
100%. So the Latin word concutere means a shake of the brain.
Okay.
So you know your brain is housed in the skull.
Yeah.
So you've got the brain floating around in the skull in this confined space with fluid around it.
Yeah.
So what happens with concussion is you have an acceleration or deceleration injury, which means if the skull itself, the bone, is stopped suddenly or bumps into something, the brain inside that is still a little bit in a suspended floating medium moves forward and backwards. You can then have a coup, contra coup injury, or it can twist, or the tissue of the brain, which is like a sponge, with that high velocity that suddenly stopped, can actually stretch the sponge and go back to normal.
Wow.
So you can shake the brain, you can stretch the brain, leading to different types of injuries and so forth. But generally, it's the shaking of the brain that leads to a temporary neurological deficit. Your function of the nervous system is affected temporarily because of that shaking.
Yeah. I suppose my experience of a concussion has to be of the many different soapies I've watched. The Bold and the Beautiful, Days of Our Lives, you name it. Every time someone suddenly doesn't remember a thing, they go, I had a concussion and I don't remember what happened.
Memory loss.
We've established that that's not quite it. But what are the signs of a concussion when you do have one, or when someone has had one?
Yes, so they can differ depending on the velocity or the degree of energy that's transferred during the concussion.
Yeah.
So, you know, 180 kilometers on a motorbike, when you come off that and have a concussion, is different to a 60-kilometer accident, for example. So dependent on the velocity, but also dependent on the age of the person. Remember that our anatomy differs as we get older in terms of flexibility of the neck, in terms of the suppleness of your muscle, etc., your tone. Long of the short is, so you get basically alterations in your level of consciousness. Sometimes you can lose consciousness after the big bang or the knock, falling off a jungle gym in children. Sometimes they could just be confused, disorientated. So you have the level of consciousness issue. Then you have the balance issue where people are giddy and they can't walk properly. And then you have the behavioral issues as well, where they're just acting weird. I mean, I'll never forget at first team's level at Grey, one of the guys got concussed and started eating the grass. He thought he was a cow.
Oh, what?
Oh, wow.
So confusion, and really out of it. So that temporary, those symptoms are hectic. Nausea, vomiting, blurry vision, a double vision, all that associated obviously with things like persistent headaches, etc. as well. So quite a few, a range of symptoms that you need to be aware of.
Yeah, wow, thank you so much. Well, Dr. Darren Green's not going anywhere. We're going to continue our talk about concussions, and after the break I want to find out what should one do if you have a concussion.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
All right, so it's a Tuesday and we're still hanging out with Dr. Darren Green talking about a concussion. And the question I want to know now, I mean, things happen all the time, but what should you do if you have a concussion?
Yeah, well, often you don't know you've had one. So you're so oblivious to the fact that you've had a knock, you think you're 100%. Just watch any schoolboy rugby game. They just want to get back on there. They don't want to miss a game. They want their school honours or colours. So often the people that are watching are the people that notice, and they can see the disturbance in your balance, the disturbance in your concentration, etc., and in your behavioral changes as well. So you yourself might find difficulty in concentrating. So often post-concussion, you find people really struggling with mood changes, energy levels, dips, being really tired, the visual disturbance where you actually span across the room and the vision comes afterwards. Those kind of symptoms. And then, of course, persistent headaches, nausea, vomiting, loss of appetite, those are real problems that one needs to report and be vigilant of to look for complications of concussion.
But what do you do? So now you experience all of that. What do I do? Do I drink lots of water? What do I do?
No. Well, obviously, you need to be examined and assessed. So we'll need to, obviously, depending on the neurological symptoms, we might have to go and look. Did you have a fracture of the brain and the skull? Is there a bleed underneath, on the surface of the brain or inside the brain from that injury? And sometimes you even get a thing called DAI, which is diffuse axonal injury. The axons of the nerve cells in the brain that are stretched at that high velocity stopping, stretch like a sponge and then go back. You often rupture those axons, causing certain neurological deficits in the brain. So that can be quite really debilitating.
Dr. Darren, you were saying that it doesn't have to only happen in sports, that it can happen anywhere. Is there thus different types of concussions?
Yeah, so you get high velocity, low velocity concussions, etc. So yes, you would get concussions associated with different levels of injury, but in general the principles are the same. It's just neurological deficit brought about by the shaking of that brain.
Is it preventable though? Can one actually prevent a concussion?
Yeah, so they've looked, for example, at things in contact sport, like wearing a gum guard.
Okay.
Whether that can minimize your chances of the long-term effects and outcomes of concussion. We've also looked at scrum caps, for example, with padding around it. But we can't wrap ourselves in cotton balls, cotton wool balls, and it makes it very difficult. There are risks associated with a lot of the contact sports. I know from Springbok Rugby or SA Rugby, for example, the Box Smart campaign is magnificent in looking at identifying early concussion signs, the flag signs, and actually removing people from the field immediately and not letting them return to play until they are fully recovered. So we are taught to analyze video footage live next to the field when we have a test match or whatever, and we actually assess it and then decide right there whether someone needs to be pulled from play or not.
It might help prevent a concussion, but it ain't going to prevent the cauliflower ears.
That's a different story.
That's a different situation altogether.
Yeah, indeed. Well, we're still hanging out with Dr. Darren Green. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, 021-430-9881. Give us a call if you've got a question or comment for the good doctor. Stay with us.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
You're back with your feel-good breakfast show. It's Expresso right here on SABC3. It's Medical Tuesday. Dr. Darren Green is here. We're talking concussions this morning, and I wanted to know, with everything that we've already been going through and you've been detailing to us what it all is about and the levels and the different kinds, how long do the symptoms of a concussion usually last?
Great question. So it differs. Average, a little bump on the head, 5 to 7 days, and you can be back to yourself. That doesn't mean you can go back to contact sport and playing. There's a certain protocol for that, which I'll get into. But in terms of duration, depending on the velocity, intensity of that injury, it could last months, weeks to months.
Wow.
And some people develop post-concussive syndrome.
Okay.
And that in itself is a condition where you have memory loss, persistent headaches, difficulty, obviously, with energy levels, sleeping. Your mood can all be altered quite a lot. So we do what's called a graded return to activity and play, where you need to be assessed by someone qualified in the system of recognizing the symptoms, even quantifying certain things. There are various tools out there, neuropsychological testing tools that we use, and that gives us an indication to small differences as to when you're actually improving and you are ready to go back. We often send the kids with a letter to school to let the teachers know that in the classroom, if the child struggles to concentrate, has headaches, etc., they must just be mindful that it's not on purpose, that it's part of the syndrome, and that they might need special concessions around testing time and exam time.
We've got a caller. Leanne is on the line for us. Hey, Leanne in Bloemfontein. Leanne.
Hello.
Hi there.
Hi, Leanne.
I have a question about all the concussions. I basically have all of the symptoms. I get blackouts. I drink about 16 headache pills a day. I keep having nausea. I lost my appetite every time. So I just want to know, what can I do? What's my next step to fix everything?
Sure.
Wow.
So I take it Leanne's had a head injury of sorts.
Have you had a head injury, Leanne?
Yes, I was in a car accident about 2 to 3 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So that's quite a long time.
Yeah.
So to suffer with persistent headaches after a car accident 2 to 3 years ago is really not normal.
Yeah.
So she needs to be assessed by a neurologist. She needs to be examined. Obviously, there are quite a few things that one would look at in terms of the character of the headache, the type of the headache. Remember that taking medication as chronically as she is can have with it dire consequences on the systemic health. It can affect your stomach, it can affect your digestion, and so forth. And even obviously things like codeine addiction can affect and make you nauseous and cause constipation and all that kind of thing. So I would recommend, if you have persistent symptoms, that you definitely make your way to a neurologist to be examined and to be checked out thoroughly.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Leanne. All the best with that. Gosh, 2 to 3 years after the fact, hey?
Exactly, that's a long time, you know. And the different types of headaches, you just need to be on the right treatment for the right type of headache, so that we don't end up, abusing medication and the side effects of meds, obviously, as well.
Exactly.
Well, yeah,
you were saying?
I was saying the beauty of it is that there is help, right? There is help. It is, you can get help and be sorted out.
Yeah,
Correct.
fantastic. We've got one more chat with Dr. Darren Green. I feel like people are now getting into the vibe. You can give us a call, 021-430-9881. He's here to help you, by the way. That's why we have the expert in the house. We're talking concussion, so do give us a call if you have a question or comment.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Well, time for us to finish our final chat with Dr. Darren Green. We're talking all things concussion. And of course, I want to know, with rugby season being in its peak, when it comes to a rugby player having one concussion after the next, how many can they have before they absolutely need to just stop playing?
Great, and a lot of people ask that question.
Yeah.
Years ago, they'd say 2 major and 1 minor.
Okay.
Well, the answer now is there is no golden number. We look at your case individually, we look at your neuropsychological functioning and your level of impairment, the domains that might have been changed. We compare scores over time, etc. And your assessment is done professionally to advise you as to whether you can return to play.
Okay.
We do know that the degree or intensity of the concussion will affect the prognosis.
Okay, wow.
Okay. We've got a caller
Yeah.
on the line. Kevin.
From
Good morning.
Pietermaritzburg.
Good morning.
Good morning. Yes, Dr. Green, how are you?
Morning. Good, thank you.
Okay. What actually happened to me in 2009/10, I had horse racing injuries from racing.
Yes.
And I've since been back from my MRI, and they found that there's white blotches all over the brain, and a specialist surgeon actually said that it's due to previous head injuries.
Yes.
I try not to take any things when I do get headaches. However, I can't do any other extra things which I used to be able to do, squash and also a bit of running and that, to keep myself as fit as possible. So I would like to find out, what are those white blotches? Because he said it's from previous head injuries.
Yes, great. So I mentioned earlier on a condition called DAI, and if you want to Google it, it's diffuse axonal injury, where the axons, or the stem part of the nerve cells, basically, where they are stretched during that high velocity, and horse racing, of course, right at the top of the list in terms of high velocity head injuries, where the brain is stretched like a sponge and then returns to normal because of its consistency. Those cells are stretched, and the ones that they're not torn or ruptured have then obviously an effect in the white matter of the brain. You can see that. Remember, around the nerve cell, there's a jelly-like layer called a myelin sheath that is quite important in terms of assuring faster conduction. It's like insulating a copper wire.
Yeah.
And sometimes the damage can lead to damage of that sheath as well. And then your body actually needs to remodel or remake that jelly-like layer. Takes a long time for that to happen. But in terms of managing the complications of his concussion, he mentions obviously also headaches, like the previous caller. Look at simple analgesia. Look at prevention rather than cure. Look at obviously things like your lifestyle, your diet, things that contribute. And obviously important things like sleep, the amount of alcohol we drink, all play a very big role in terms of those symptoms unmasking. So there is quite a bit you can do from a lifestyle perspective. But in terms of those white spots, normally that's the cause.
Wow.
And so they will go away, obviously, or not?
No, you have scar tissue in the brain. What's reassuring is that the process of neuroplasticity is where the surrounding cells can actually take on some of the function that is lost by those cells. So you need to keep on working at tasks, concentration tasks, executive function, Sudoku, you know, things that force you to develop those skills. And then those areas that were lost can actually, some of that function can be regained.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Kevin, for your call. Thank you so much to Leanne earlier as well. Thank you so much, Dr. Darren Green, for helping us just, you know, find our way through this very interesting concept or the topic of concussion, because I think a lot of people are dealing with it, and of course the post kind of stress and symptoms that come with it. You're amazing.
Thank you.
We love you. You're welcome back anytime.
Thank you. Thanks.
Awesome stuff. That is our medical chat with Dr. Darren Green on this beautiful Tuesday morning.